Good evening. Welcome to the July 16th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. For those in attendance this evening, there are copies of the agenda on either side of the room. For those watching at home, welcome as well. If you go to the village's website, in the lower left-hand corner, there's a link for this week's meetings. You can follow along there. Before we get started, let's all rise together and say the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
April, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Gray?
Here.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Here.
Commissioner Wallace?
Here.
Commissioner Earl? Here. Commissioner Jose?
Here.
Mayor Barnett?
Here. Thank you. Got a full team tonight. That's fantastic. First order of business are minutes of previous council meetings. We have one set of minutes to consider.
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the minutes as presented.
Second.
Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you all. Moving on to public comments. Tonight's meeting, we have two opportunities for public comment. One is right now on any subjects that are not on tonight's agenda, and then as we roll through the agenda, when we hit a particular item, if you'd like to speak on that, you're welcome to as well. So are there any folks who have something to address the council with that is not on tonight's agenda? Please come up to the podium, state your name, and let us know why you're here.
Hi, my name is Preston Straub. I've been here a couple of times. Talk about building Board of Appeals and the process that's involved there. At one point, I came here and was asked if we could meet with some people regarding this issue, and a meeting took place with, I believe, 3 department heads: fire department, the building manager, and village attorney. There is no appeals board. You obviously know that by now. I have several issues, and I'm going to try to be short and go through them. We presented 2 to 3 department heads an alternate method of protection for our condo association. We were very abruptly denied that presentation of what we wanted to do. I'll just say it like that. We have an alternate method that we want to use. And furthermore, we were threatened that if we try to do anything like that, that our buildings would be red tagged. I got a problem with that, because I think I'm still trying to get the board to see that we have the right to take this to an independent board, independent of employees of the jurisdiction, to have them take a look at what we want to do. It's just not fair that this issue continues to be held, I hate to say it, but it almost seems like it's trying to be held up in the back room. We want to try to get it out in front of some people to take an independent look at what we want to do, to see if it's agreeable. I just don't think it's right what's going on. Now, the last time I came, the mayor suggested that he didn't want to talk about certain things because we have a matter regarding or related to this issue that was in traffic court, okay? In my mind, that does not absolve the village from having an appeals board to look at this issue. It's independent of the issue entirely. And so I feel like, I need to come and say this to you so that something can be done about it. It's just not, I feel it's our right of due process to follow these stages. And they're just not being offered to us. So I said I had several questions that I wanted to address. What I wanted to know is, in the past, okay, believe me, I wouldn't be wasting your time. I said this before. But all I've ever received going through the stages is arbitrary, and I hate to use the word, but arbitrary nonsense. Nobody has ever been able to come and cut and define. And that's why we're at where we're at. And all I want to do is to just get this over with. I mean, it's craziness. It's craziness. And so that's why I'm here, and what I want to do as an additional question is to find out, because our attorney hasn't been able to find out, and I don't know why, if I can get what's going on here as an agenda item. Because I think there's things that you need to see regarding the workings of what's going on in the village. I'm not saying that it's corrupt or anything like that, okay? I'm just saying I think there's some things you need to take a look at. And I think people like myself, now that we're in the village, need to have an avenue to some kind of independent board here, regardless of what it is, if this is what we're going to run into. So that's why I'm here. So I'm waiting to hear your feedback. I mean, that's what I have to say.
So I'm going to first start by saying I'm not fully engaged in this process since it began, because it began when?
Well, it began, everything was fine. We were one of the first ones to be hooked up to the new radio system. Everything was fine, and then there was this idea that the village wanted to come in and enforce inspections in private dwelling units, which was around, I want to say, don't hold me to this, around 2016. Okay? And this is where the matter started, I started like, here, no. And it's like, wait, yes. And so it's just kind of a back and forth.
So there's two things that are important, I think, to remember. And the first is that there is a process. And my understanding is that we're working through that process. Now, that's not the same as saying that everybody likes the process or that the process necessarily delivers satisfaction to everybody that's engaged in it. I realize that sometimes those don't happen. But the process is the same for everybody. And there is a process of being alerted when something is not consistent with what the village's expectations are, how to remedy that. Bringing alternative code ideas or alternative structural ideas or anything else technical to this body would be something that would happen, first of all, it wouldn't happen just like this, because this body is not prepared to,
Sure, I understand.
to decide anything on a
Yes.
highly technical basis. So we have folks who do that for us. And I guess I'm a little skeptical, if you will, pardon me, that there's anything arbitrary about it. It is likely that it's a process which is not providing you with the satisfaction that you're seeking, which I understand that, and I appreciate that. But it's been through a series of internal things, as I understand it, as well as external through the courts. And so I think the process is probably done what we expect. If you've got additional things that you want this group to consider, the way to do that is to write them down, send them into the village manager, and then what that team will do is help us understand what it is. Because if you talk about a specifically technical issue, we may well just simply not be able to evaluate it. So the process has worked, I believe, properly and gone through the courts, which I hate doing that, but eventually sometimes it goes there. If you've got additional things that you talk about, alternative methods, I think we're talking about technical elements, I'd suggest you write those down, send them to the village manager. They will package that up for us to try and help us understand what that really means. But in the meantime, there's a process that's going on and is going through and been through the courts. And so that process has to stand. And that's all I can offer you at this point. It's impossible, if you consider you're certainly aware of what a village code looks like, that we would be able to weigh in on any one particular alternative to any element of it in an individual on and off basis. Just not going to do that. So I think that would be your next step if you'd like to continue.
I agree with pretty much everything you just said. However, I don't think you heard me clearly when I said I met with 3 department heads as to an alternate method of protection. This is actually the role of the appeals board, to look at an alternate method of protection. It's not the members of Downers Grove, the employees of Downers Grove. It is the purpose for the appeals board is to take an independent look at what we want to do. We're being denied this process, irrespective of some traffic court case. I don't care about that. I didn't care about it when you brought it up last time. It's independent of the issue here. We're trying to propose to the village an alternate method, okay? They denied it, threatened red tags.
I understand that.
Okay, so where is our due process to take this to the appeals board?
I think that
It's still a procedure, excuse me for interrupting.
No, that's
It's
fine.
still a procedure, okay? It's still in the code.
Right.
It doesn't go away because there's a traffic court case.
Now, there are time limits to various things, and I don't know enough about this to debate it for much longer this evening.
Okay.
But the process is, somebody's alerted to something they have to remedy, and then there's a process to doing that, and there's a process for asking for appeal. Each of those has limits on them in timing. And I think we exceeded and went past those limits and finally ended up having to be in court. So if you, again, whether it's a technical thing or even the process itself, if you'd like to suggest a change, write them down, deliver them to the village, they'll circulate them amongst us and try and get us up to speed on it.
Could I trouble you with one more clarification?
I can
Is there
try.
a way to get an item on your agenda? Is there a way for a resident to get you to actually have it show up on
Yeah,
the screen?
that's how it happens, what I just described.
Okay.
So that agenda, you bring an issue to us like you're doing now, submit something so we have a record of what you're looking for, and then we ask our staff to package it for us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for hearing me. Thanks. Have a good night.
All right, you too. Any other public comments for this evening? All right, we'll move on to consent agenda then.
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Consent agenda passes unanimously. We're on to our active agenda. Is there a motion to authorize a special use?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 6301 Main Street to permit a fueling station as presented.
Second.
Is there any additional council comments or questions about this item? No? Okay. All right, April, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. Mayor Barnett screwed that up. Supposed to offer the opportunity for public comment on that item. Is there anybody here that would like to address us on that, even though we've passed it now unanimously? All right, moving on then. Is there an ordinance to authorize a special use on Wisconsin Avenue?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt an ordinance authorizing a special use for 2300 Wisconsin Avenue, Unit 101, to permit a personal vehicle sales business as presented.
Second.
Okay, let's start with public comment. Is there anybody here who'd like to address the council on this issue? No? Okay, any council questions or comments? Okay, April, please call the roll.
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Kolovany?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That also passes unanimously. There is no first reading tonight, so we'll move on to the manager's report.
Likewise, there is no manager's report tonight. Mayor, thank you.
Fantastic. Mayor and council reports. Let's start to our right. Commissioner Kolovany.
On behalf of the Downers Grove Historical Society, and I was present on behalf of the mayor for the dedication this Saturday at the Montreux Dunham History Center at the museum, which is owned by the Park District. It was a great event, very well attended, and the Dunham family was there in force, so it was a wonderful thing for the village.
Awesome, thank you. Commissioner Sadowski Fugit.
All I have is that the Saturday is coffee with the council, so come, talk to us, yell at us, whatever your fancy would be that day.
Or have a cup of coffee.
Yeah, or have a cup of coffee.
Commissioner
Make
Wallace.
do it all.
This is going to be shocking, but I have no report.
Not real sure what to do next.
A weather?
No, right? Where do we go from here? I don't know.
Not even a weather report?
How's the coffee with the
Beautiful
council gonna be?
outside.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
You know what, I've just had a few interactions in terms of following up as I've come into this role. Very positive, so I appreciate the community and their support and their encouragement. And as Leslie mentioned, I'm looking forward to speaking with some of them at the Coffee with the Council.
Fantastic. Mr. Earl.
And piggybacking off of Commissioner Kolovany's report, I want to congratulate Dr. Gordon Goodman on winning the first annual Montreux Dunham Award for just being the advocate and the historic preservationist that he is. And it's great to see Gordon recognized. He's an awesome guy, and he's been doing it for a long time, and we can all hope we can follow in his footsteps. So congratulations to Gordon.
Fantastic, thank you. Commissioner Jose.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to piggyback off of the coffee with the council and remind folks that it's at the Main Street train stop right outside the farmer's market at 9 o'clock on Saturday. And hopefully there will be a little iced coffee because it's going to be hot.
I was going to request that.
Iced coffee.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. The only comment I have is on this subject of weather and heat. It is supposed to be pretty tough the next few days, and so if you're out there, keep an eye on folks. Keep an eye on your neighbors, your friends, your relatives. If you need help, please contact folks that are available to help. If it's an emergency, dial 911. Don't hesitate. We'd rather be helpful if the need is there. There are other opportunities for help. Use our website. Use the DuPage County CRIS site. But look out for each other. It's going to be a tough couple of days, and we need to keep an eye on each other. That's all I have. So with that, Mr. Jose.
Mayor, I move that the council recess to the committee room for item 10 on the agenda, the council governance discussion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are moving to the committee room. Thank you all. Talking about governance tonight, and you guys all have had a memo for a few days, I think. And then,
Need a motion to get back in?
oh, thank you. So before we do that, we need a motion to come back in, sir.
All right, motion to reconvene.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are back in session. So we're talking tonight about governance, and you guys all have had a chance to go through this memo a little bit. We've also had some individual meetings on the subject. I think the main thing that we want to do tonight is just collectively, while we're all together, talk about some of the things the same way as we did it in the one-on-ones, and give everybody an opportunity, if they've got an issue, to take issue and then raise the issue. We've seen this, we've all talked about this. The governance is Dave did a good job of explaining, it's the stuff that fills the spaces in between. We have ordinances, we have rules that are all printed, and we have expectations of each other. And a lot of those expectations of each other are internal, but a lot of them are external too. So how do we talk with the press? How do we talk with the public? How do we interact with people from different government agencies? How do we deal with and represent ourselves collectively and individually, inside and outside? So that's what these 12 I think it was, rules that are on those lists, rules, bad choice of words, those 12 issues that are described are attempting to do. This governance model in my 10 years has changed probably 4 or 5 times, various elements of it. Meeting structures have changed. New business systems for introducing new business have changed. The roles of boards and commissions have changed. There have been some changes. The point of that is to say there can be more changes. I think I've said to everybody, and I just want to say it again, my hope is with a brand new mayor who can't even figure out how to operate an agenda yet, dais, and 3 brand new council people, that we take this subject matter and we go with what's been working for a while. We just kind of roll with it. I want to make sure everybody, though, feels that they're free to have dissent with that, to have an issue with it, to have an issue with any one of the items. My hope is that if we do, we'll sort of put those in the margin and we'll write them down and we'll commit to each other. I'll certainly commit to us all that we're going to talk about it at some point. But we have a list of things in front of us that's a pretty heavy workload. We have a budget we have to do. We have a levy we have to do. We have this marijuana thing we have to do. All of those are not optional and have due dates and deadlines. And then we have the list that you guys have all seen, starting with long-range planning stuff. There's a lot of real work to do. This in itself could become an overwhelming task. It could consume a lot of time, both our time and our staff's time. So what we're going to do tonight, what I'd like to do tonight is I'd like to just touch on these and briefly see if anybody has any questions or any comments about it. If not, we'll just go right through them, run right through them. This thing is important. Expectations are important. It's important to go through this list. It's also important that we continue to talk with each other because those expectations are learned. Some of them are start out of the gate, but then you can learn and evolve those expectations. And I hope that we get to the point where all of this becomes stuff that there's nobody ever waits a second or thinks twice about asking a question or about saying I disagree with it. I hope that we all get to the point where that's fine. And I think probably everybody's comfortable with that. But I'm still learning, so bear with me. So, council meetings. You guys know the way we get to council meetings, the way we build an agenda is staff builds an agenda. Greg and I meet with them on Fridays. We try and discuss timing of agendas. Really, it's not so much whether subjects should be on an agenda, whether they should be on an agenda now, or whether they need to wait, or whether they need more sort of development before they get there. There's the Monday morning meetings, the purpose, or phone calls rather, the purpose of those Monday morning phone calls, or whenever they happen, I guess tomorrow morning. is to try and ferret out, as something's been thought through since Friday's distribution, is it something that everybody feels good about? Are there questions about it? Are there technical questions that need to be answered? Or are there policy questions that we're just not sure we like? The best meeting we can have is when we're all as prepared as possible, and that's what we're trying to get to that point of being. That's another situation, just to give another example of how things have changed in this governance model. Those packages of information we all get electronically, used to be delivered hard copy before anybody else got them. With the sort of evolution of council and evolution of technology, that's all available to everybody. It helps transparency, it helps efficiency, it also makes sure everybody realizes we're all on the same page. So that process, right now, I feel like that process works pretty well. I think everybody kind of agrees. But if there's anything along the way that you say, you know, I wish we would do X a little differently, write it down, bring it up, let's get into it, okay? Any questions about that? Anything in anybody's mind that they don't like about it?
No, the only thing that I mentioned in our governance chat before this was that if we could get like a drilled down or like a real vague description of minutes from other or like boards and subcommittees or boards and commissions, it would be nice to just kind of take the pulse on what's going on some of those boards and commissions to make sure that we're not missing anything big.
When we were talking in one-on-one meetings about boards and commissions, so there's, I think, at least 3 versions probably sitting at this table right now about what the perfect setup for boards and commissions is. But one thing that probably would help us all and really wouldn't change anything except provide us all better, more consistent information is something Leslie brought up, which was this idea that there would be a circulated, sort of proactively circulated synopsis of minutes. And so what I can do, what I'll do tonight when I leave here, is I'll send everybody individually, of course, Madam Attorney. I get something like that from the county. The county has all these various boards and subcommittees as well. And I get a periodic email that is a 3 or 4 bullet point about each of those meetings. And it allows you to sort of just stay a little more current than digging down through the minutes. So, if anybody's opposed to that, we could rethink it, but I'm thinking that's a pretty good idea. Does that make sense?
I think that would be helpful. A lot of times the minutes are embedded in our agendas, and you don't always see them because they get glossed over. But when you do need to read them, sometimes they are really, can be real, especially the Plan Commission meetings and the ZBA. Those meetings minutes can be long sometimes. So when there's a lot of detail, so that would not be a bad thing to highlight that those things are actually, and then if you have questions, you can go looking for those minutes, because they're out there.
Sure.
But then you at least you need to go looking for them. A little more proactive.
Exactly.
A little more proactively, yeah. Because we do get such a volume of stuff to read every week.
Yeah, and it's hard to know as you start to skim, right? You start reading the first paragraph, and then by paragraph 5, you're skimming.
Right.
And you don't know if you're missing something.
And you don't want to miss anything.
Right. Rich?
Would it be onerous to have a link to each one of the minutes so we could click on it?
Yeah, okay, that's even better.
As opposed to having to hunt it down in each.
Yeah.
I just went ahead and sent that to everyone. We just got one a few minutes before this council
Oh, did
meeting,
we?
so I just sent it out to everyone.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, board and commission meetings. That's the one that probably has the most, I'm sensing there's at least several versions of how we ought to handle those. That's one that is personally one that is, I wish there were some changes to. But I'm falling back on this idea that our workload right now says that that's something that ought to stay the way it is until we just get a few miles under our belts. Get some decisions made as a group, get some bigger decisions made, get past this budgeting and marijuana stuff, and get into, if we want to get into that, in my mind, it's a next year kind of a thing. So, what are people's thoughts on that? Hanging out?
I'm fine with that.
Go ahead, Rich.
Well, I have a comment. I don't think we need to drill down on the specific boards and commissions, but it was a feeling of the previous council that village commissioners were not to attend those meetings because it might put either undue influence or make those people on the commissions feel uncomfortable. And on, sitting on Plan Commission for 2 years and ZBA for almost 2 years before that, I can say, if they showed up at one meeting, and said, oh, like when the mayor was there, what's he doing here? But if it's more frequent, it's kind of like anyone else that shows up. And then you get really quickly engulfed in what you're doing, and you kind of forget they're there. So I just, as someone who sat on two of those boards, I didn't feel intimidated at all. Plus, there are times, particularly with Plan Commission, where the issues are so complex, it's impossible to capture everything in the minutes. And there are times where, you know, for instance, I'd like to be able to attend one of those meetings on something that was particularly complex and to hear the back and forth. So that's my only comment on that.
There's a lot of what you said that I agree with, but I also know that there's some pretty strongly held opinions that are pretty much opposite of that. And there's neither one of those is right, and what we would be doing, hopefully down the road, is the seven of us would sit around a table like this and hammer that out, revisit that, and have this conversation. But I'm just going to keep pushing this idea that we hang on to that stuff for a future date. It's not something, I mean, I can only say this, I can't say it enough times, but I don't want anybody to think that when I'm trying to encourage us to wait, it's so that we never talk about it. I genuinely don't mean that. That's part of why we're all together, so we're all looking at each other to agree to that. But that's a sticky wicket, right?
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things I've done in the past, Rich, is while I haven't attended any meetings that I can think of a board or commission, there have been times where I've read the minutes and really wondered if it captured the full essence of the conversation, and I've gone back and asked for the audio.
Okay.
And staff has provided that in the past. I think I've done that maybe twice over 6 years, but they were particularly meaty issues, and they've been happy to work with me on that. So.
And I think as well, the alternative to that was staff was willing to let us sit in the back room and let the feed come right in, so that you could hear it in live time. Just you weren't visible, and that was the big thing, because that's when it starts to skew, and it does. It starts to skew their perception.
Okay.
But, you know, I don't think the intention is to keep us from the information. I think the intention is more to let them make their decision without them being influenced by our presence.
Yeah. No, I never felt it was to keep information.
So.
Mr. Mayor, a quick question. I feel like I've been trying to, is there an elevator pitch version of the makeup of the Downtown Management Corporation? I feel like I've missed something as I've tried to understand how they organize it, how they're organized.
There is. So Downtown Management Corporation is a separate entity made up of business owners, property owners, and third category, and residents, potential tenants that reside in the downtown or have property in the downtown or have businesses in the downtown. They elect their own body. They have their own set of bylaws, and they're responsible for operating many of the things that people kind of see, the car shows and the art shows and the various activities that happen downtown, coordination with holiday decorations, things like that.
Okay.
But they're sort of a separate entity from the village.
Thanks.
Are we okay moving on, boards and commissions? Rich?
Yep.
Good with hanging tight for a while?
Absolutely.
Other government agency meetings, there's a little blurb on that. I think the main thing there is that we want to make sure, and this kind of ties together with some of this communicating with the public and press things. We have to each find our role and find our comfort, but stay focused on and keep it sort of prominent in the top that when we're out talking to people, we're representing the village and ourselves, and we have to be really careful about that. So if we're out talking to somebody, we're not necessarily representing village council opinion, unless it is, right? It's a weird thing. Because sometimes you're out and it's exactly what you're doing. You're describing what the village council's policy or opinion is. We have to be super sensitive to that and thoughtful and diligent. I'm sure we can do it, but it's just a good reminder that as we do those things, we need to be figuring out how to balance that line. The other thing is we need to be including our staff. So we need to circle back around. When we talk with residents, when we talk with other government agencies, we need to circle back around with staff. That's not a super controlled big brother thing. It's a matter of everybody's working really hard every day and doesn't have enough hours. And so if we're spinning our wheels, we're giving cross-contact information, it works against people getting good work done. So that's all there is on that. Conflict of council. Do we have to go? Do we have to go?
Change the
I
time?
like it.
We don't want to be rocking in the back of our chair if we don't make it to conflict of
I
council.
know, I feel bad.
Conflict of council, a couple of things about conflict of council. One is people should go as much as they can, but they shouldn't make it feel like it's a burden. They shouldn't feel upset if they don't make it. Right? That's the first thing. The second thing is, how do we do them? Right now, we're doing them, you guys have seen, many of you have seen, we do them generally at the library, we do them at the farmer's market, occasionally do them at Fire Station 2. That's something that has evolved. In the past, there was a time we tried moving them around. We went to some senior residences, we went to, at one point, McCullum Park's shelter. We've done a variety of things. We could do that again. It's another subject that I'm thinking we should just hang tight and do what we're doing, but it's certainly something that everybody should think through. Are we comfortable with the format of them? Are we comfortable with the location of them? Are we comfortable with the frequency of them? So, any thoughts on that?
Just a question, how did it work when you rotated? Did it help or was it confusing to people?
Don't know the answer to that. We got attendance, so the attendance was, I would say, when we went to some senior residences, a pretty captive audience. So we had a higher number of folks there. But it might have been a little bit of a curiosity as much as it was a desire to come talk about a specific subject. At McCullum, the way I recall that, there was hardly anybody there. It was like a couple of people rode by on their bikes and were like, what's going on here? I don't think they came to see us. So I think it's a very mixed bag, and I don't know that there's been a particular element, except maybe the farmer's market, that people that come to us seem to enjoy. Marge?
Yeah, I think over the years, Rich, that at least as long as I've been involved, going on like 12, 13 years, it's bounced, I've seen it bounce around and I've lobbied it for it to bounce around, but the more it moves, the less people show up because you don't know where it is.
A confusing
And,
factor.
yeah, so the fact that it's the set Saturday at a set time, and we're there every month, and if it's, warm outside, we're at the farmer's market, and if it's cold outside, we're at the library, and by and large, we will catch people, and they might remember to come out, they might remember that we have it, but it seems like mostly what we get is people just happening to catch us, and so we kind of have to go, I think, where they are, and those seem to be the most likely places.
I use the same rationale when I wasn't getting paid to come to those.
Right.
Kavanaugh?
I was just asking, is it usually just a handful of people that show up each week, a trickle, like you mentioned, people passing?
If it's a nice day outside,
Okay.
you've got a bunch of people
Okay.
who are going to the farmer's market. If it's a crummy day outside,
Right.
you might get nobody.
Okay.
And the same thing, and the times when you think we're not gonna get anybody, like the one that was right before Christmas last year at the library, thought, oh, it's right before Christmas, nobody's gonna be here. It was packed. So it all depends on if there's also an issue out there
Which there
that they need to talk about. So it's very much kind of just a give and take thing.
It's something that probably the best description of is, I think Mayor Tully used this a couple times. There was somebody who told him he has never come to these things, but he's really glad to know that he could. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. If you were trying to gauge the effectiveness of them by head count or attendance or issues, I think you'd be hard pressed to make a good case for it. But people do like to know they can. I think that's the main reason we do it, really.
And I think they interact with us on a different level. When they're stopping and talking to you one-on-one, they feel like they get to know you, that they can make their case, and you can explain to them maybe why something is happening better to their satisfaction because they have your full attention. They might not have all of our full attention, but at least they've got one person at a time. And I think that really helps them, the public in general.
Which actually brings up another good point. If three of us are engaged with a constituent and they start bringing up an issue, one of us needs to back off, correct?
No, we typically notice this.
Because we notice those. They're
They are
noticed.
noticed as a public meeting.
Okay.
Yep.
We do address those.
That we're okay.
So we can discuss anything?
Yeah.
But otherwise,
Although if you're getting deep in the weeds, it might not be bad to say, you know what, let's bring out some additional people.
Well, I mean, usually with
And
having
staff
the
is
village
usually-
manager
yeah,
there.
yeah.
and-
right.
deputy village manager, they can drill down as needed.
And they typically take names and information and get back to people when we can't answer the question. Because a lot of times it's like, oh, there's a pothole or there's something specific. And that's when staff has to get involved until we, shuffle them over to staff, and staff takes the information, and, Monday, Tuesday, they get back to them. So,
That rule is anything that's, there's a certain process for public announcement, preparation for it, and then record keeping as well, I think is part of that as well. And so we make sure the council meet the criteria of a publicly announced meeting. But that is concerned actually, perfect segue to the next subject, which is communicating with the public. Marge's point, that people talk to you a little differently at coffee with the council, they talk to you a little differently one-on-one. They talk to you a little differently when they're behind a keyboard. There's a variety of ways. And so one of the things here too, we talked about this a little bit earlier, involving staff is a good idea for the sure fact of keeping everybody involved. But it's not necessary. You need to find a comfort zone that you have. And oftentimes that will be dependent upon the subject and dependent on the person. And it really is a one-off thing. What staff wants you to know, jump in, is that they're available, so they want to be helpful. So if at some point you think it's helpful to say, you know what, I'm going to have staff get back to you, by all means do it. If you want to say to somebody, you know what, I don't know, let me look into that a little further, and then rely on staff, they will absolutely help you. They want to be a resource to help us do that well. And how we do it on each individual one-off interaction is largely up to us individually. But let's make sure that we're trying to keep everybody in the loop. I think you saw, so last week with the stormwater note that Dave recirculated something that I sent out. As things get sort of churning and more folks get involved, you'll start to realize how important it is that we're all talking to each other and keeping each other appraised of what's going on. Anything on that subject of communicating with?
yeah, I have a few things, Bob.
Sure.
We have to, I think, it can't be stressed enough how careful you have to be when you're putting something in writing. It's all foiable, and stuff on Facebook, and unfortunately we've had this happen, can get us sued. And so we have to be consciously protecting the village, because otherwise it's costing everyone money when the wrong stuff comes out of our mouth. So I just really want to emphasize, be careful what you're putting out there on Facebook, because we don't want it to come back and bite us. If you have any, be general, don't be specific. Don't when it comes to a specific topic maybe, or it's a person or something, be very careful what you put out there. And even if it's on your private Facebook, not on a public Facebook page, it can come back and it can bite us. And we've seen it happen, and we really don't want to go there again. So just to be conscious of that. And I think always checking with ENZA especially, because that is where some of the stuff comes in, is the legalese, where we can get in trouble. So
Marge makes a very good point, and we really all have to be cautious and thoughtful and diligent and respectful of the process and the fact that we're creating a record. We are creating a record, whether we think we are or intend to, we are. Rich, to your point about meetings, the process on Facebook, right? Somebody puts up a post, it's not us, right? And they tag all seven of us because they want us to be aware of whatever the subject is. If we all jump in there, we're violating open meetings act, because at that point it's not met the requirements for an open meeting. And it's the same kind of a thing as a series of emails that can be strung around, the same kind of a thing. If I would send an email out to all of us and then we'd all start talking about it, that's an issue. So Marge is spot on. We have to be really thoughtful and diligent. And what happens is as time goes on, you get more comfortable, you can also get lazy. And it's just really important to kind of remind yourself that you're creating a record on behalf of the village, and that with that comes some responsibilities. So,
and the same thing
Thanks.
extends to group text messages.
Absolutely, that's a good point. But at the same time, we have to, I think, leverage social media in order to get information out there. I mean, Mayor, you're pretty good at starting conversations, and I've started a few that I wish I hadn't. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that we can't live in fear of the frivolous lawsuit. I mean, there are folks out there that are going to file them, and, you know, we've got some experience with that. But, you know, we have to use the methods that are out there, and social media is very important.
I think you're exactly right. I want us to all feel comfortable doing that. I think Marge's points are good to just remind ourselves. You know, we don't get to control every interaction that we have, right? Some of them come to us, many of them come to us, including through social media. You know, we should take every opportunity to put the best light, the best construction on everything, to put the village in a good light, to convey information. It goes back to, why do we do Coffee with the Council? Because we want people to access us on their time. Well, it's true of social media too. It's their time. And we need to make sure that we're available and responsive to them. We just have to be super thoughtful and careful about it. I'm certain we can continue to do a good job, really. But it's a good reminder.
Well, I think when it comes to more than the appropriate level of discourse is the time to advise them to send an email at your Downers.us email. And then it's part of the public record and it's communicating properly.
Yeah, don't fool ourselves. Don't anybody fool yourself into thinking that your social media stuff is private. We just saw it last week with others at other levels of office. But when we act on behalf of what should appear to a normal person to be on behalf of the village, we are in fact doing just that. And we need to remember that. Remember that stuff is accessible. If you didn't want it on a billboard, don't say it.
Well, the other point, if we have official pages with our title, then that becomes a public record, and then you're not allowed to delete comments.
Or block people.
Or block people. It's not on your personal page, but if you had, you know, Richard J. Cullivaney, village commissioner, that becomes a public page.
Yeah, I'd just add that don't fool yourself into a sense of comfort. You're out talking about it. The title of the page is the content and the things that said are going to determine whether that's a private or public page.
Right.
So.
And even if you take it down, they've likely got a screenshot already, so it's too late.
I'm pretty exact with my communications on Facebook.
All right, responding to press inquiries. This doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's a little bit like resident conversations. You should know that there is plenty of resources and staff available to be helpful. If you feel comfortable responding, I can tell you, for instance, I got a couple of calls during Kavanaugh's confirmation process. Just went ahead and answered the questions. But if at any point you think that you'd like some help, ask for it. Doug is hiding in the corner. That's his job. He's really good at it, and he wants to do it. So anybody that has any situation that they would like some assistance on, jump in, call David, Doug, and get some help on it. Again, remember that the goal here is to be responsive, first of all, but it's also to put the village in the best light. It's also to relay accurate information. Those are all things that we sometimes need help doing that, so just ask for help if you need it. Okay? Respond to residents, we beat that horse, I think, a little bit. Does anybody have anything to add there? It's very much part of the conversation we've been having. No? Okay. Neighborhood meetings. A little discussion about neighborhood meetings. I think the most important thing with neighborhood meetings is to remember that they do happen. Sometimes we think, they're not. And the truth of the matter is that our staff, our team are working a lot every day, and many of those things involve neighborhood meetings. So if you wonder about them, ask staff. They'll be happy to inform you about it. Rich, to your point about sports and commission, same thing. What actually happened at them. Hook up with staff. David will put you in touch with the right person, and we'll figure out exactly what went on. But they do happen a lot, and they're good. They're excellent.
I've been a resident of one of those resident meetings.
There you go.
It was fantastic.
Yeah. They do a good job. We hear a lot about how these meetings don't happen, but they do. They do. Occasionally people miss them for some reason. They get upset and disappointed by that. But they happen often, and when they happen, they're usually very good. Groundbreaking and ribbon cuttings. I just had a conversation about this yesterday, and this is something we should just make sure we're all on the same page with. We get invited to these, as you know, from a variety of possible fronts. Chamber 630 is the most frequent. Sometimes downtown management is involved, sometimes EDC. Everybody should feel free to go to as many of those as they want to. Don't feel like you're compelled to go. the position. And then sometimes the question comes up, well, is somebody going to say something on behalf of the village? Generally speaking, I'll be saying something if I'm there. Greg will be saying something if he's there. Or like Saturday, Rich, I asked somebody to go on purpose. But that won't always happen. These things happen, and some of them, they might be a whole bunch of them in a row. And I don't just ask a bunch of people to go. So whoever goes, if I'm not there, if Greg's not there, if somebody's not been asked to attend, just get together amongst yourselves, whoever's there, and somebody say something on behalf of the village, say thank you. It doesn't have to be much, but they've invited us because it's important to them to have some recognition for the village where they've decided to open up their business or to open up shop. So go ahead and feel free to say something, but sort it out amongst yourselves. Okay? I did ask Laura Crawford and Michael Casa. I haven't talked to Aaron yet, but I did ask the two of them specifically to, we get them all the time, and if there is one that is of particular importance to the organization for some reason, to try and highlight that with us, because we're all going to try and make as many as we can, but life gets in the way, we won't, right? So they agree to do that. They'll try and highlight something if for some reason the organization has a particular need and wants us to be there. Okay. Council-directed work by staff, otherwise known as the 4-hour rule. Some of us have been involved in this for a while, others it's brand spanking new, but the general idea we've talked about is any council members and staff can ask staff to do work. Research work is usually the subject. It has to do with either an existing policy or a potential new business item. But staff's going to try and limit that work to 4 hours. The reason for that is because there's 7 of us, right? And we've all got a list. And all of a sudden, staff wouldn't get anything done if we just all asked them to do work. The reality is staff is very flexible with that. They try and answer as many questions as they can and get as much information to us as possible. How many times have we sort of invoked that?
It's very rare.
It's very rare.
It's usually with large requests for deep dives on data that it happens.
I'm probably one of the bigger offenders on that, to be honest with you. But staff really does try to answer as much information as possible. What we need to be cognizant of is the one sort of thing. If you were going to take a policy issue, there's a settled policy issue, if you will, and it's a situation where somebody on the council is just adamantly opposed to it, end up on the short end of the stick on that subject. That would be the kind of thing where we would be putting staff in a weird spot, right? Because you say, hey, we settled this policy, but I'd like you to investigate how we can change it. Right? Let's just avoid doing that. And it hasn't been an issue. I don't think it will be one, but it's something that's to be thoughtful of. Mark?
Well,
You look like you want to say something.
admitting it, Bob, is the first step to correcting it.
12-step data plan?
That's right. So, as long as you're recognizing it, I think staff's probably pretty happy.
I can tell you as a person who has received several of those, and I can't do that, answers. It's okay. It's okay. Ask a question if you got it, and you got something on your mind, ask for some help with it. They're going to be totally fair. And if it kind of turns into a situation where, hey, it's just beyond that 4-hour situation, doesn't fit into the work that's already being done, sometimes it's corollary to an LRP item that they're already working on. They might just do it anyway. But if it's some oddball thing from the sky and you kind of get some pushback on it, then talk to your colleagues, right? Because that's what we're all here for. We can adjust work plans if necessary.
And I think that the important thing is to remember to ask staff, because likely staff has gotten wind of stuff that is out in the neighborhoods and that might be coming to you. And if you take it to staff, they'll say, oh, we're going to be having something, we're going to be talking about it in 6 weeks, or we're going to be talking about it here, there, or where. So you know it's coming, and then, so you can adjust your plans accordingly, so that whatever you're thinking about at that time comes up at the appropriate time. You can be rest assured that they know what's going on and that they're working on it too. And usually that's the case. So I think probably 95% of the stuff I've seen, that's the case. So it's not new.
And worst come to worst, that's what the new business process is for.
Right.
So if it really is something that's larger than 4 hours and there's more work to be done and you really feel strongly about a particular policy initiative, there's always that avenue. how we got the peer jury program working again. And I'm sure there are 5 or 6 other things that came up. I think the pet ordinance
Yeah.
Oh, the pet, yeah.
was another new business item. So it's certainly always an avenue.
Yeah, we'll come back to that for a second, but I want to tag on to what Marge was saying. The other thing that you'll find is, to this point, go ahead and ask staff, because they may already be working on it, or it may be coming, or it may already be something we've sorted out.
That's true.
Rich's questions from last week were on stormwater, or largely a netting of a bunch of stuff that's out there. There is a lot of work out there for 25 years that none of us knows about, right? You just can't possibly know it all. But when you go ahead and ask staff, they're going to get you that answer, and it oftentimes doesn't involve work because, frankly, we've already done it, and they'll just point you to it. I can't tell you how many times I asked Dave for something, and he responds with a link, because it's done. There's a lot of really good work that's already out there. Greg, you brought up, the point of the new business process. One of the things I hope we all take away is that we've got this 12 items, and we've got this structure, but built into there, whether it's how we deal with consent agenda items and coming off of consent agenda items, or how we deal with new business or 4-hour rules, built into that is the ability for all of us to do our job as we see fit as representatives. And sometimes that's a stop, or asking for applause, or jumping in and saying, I'm not sure I like what's going on. That's absolutely our job and responsibility. Nobody should second guess themselves doing that part of it. It may well be that the result is Dave sends me a link and I've already got that data, Bob, and I've given it to you twice already. That's okay. It's better to ask and know we have it. It's better to ask and know we have it, or it's better to ask and get clarification, or it's better to ask and have us all change direction a little bit. That's okay too. That's why we're all here. We need 7 of us putting input into the process all the time. Anything further on that, because it leads right to this. Rich, we'll come back. Hang on, Mark.
The rationale about submitting that on Wednesday, was that a thing to require staff enough time if they had to dig into an issue, or?
It was one of the evolutions in the last 5 or 6 years of the governance thing, and the idea was, I think that it was kind of embedded in the idea of trying to avoid surprising anybody on a Tuesday. We, from a Roberts Rule official standpoint, there's a process for introducing the business into a meeting, but just like any other situation, we're all preparing for that meeting, and if we want to have a meaningful conversation at that meeting, it needs a little bit of prep. So I think that was the primary point of that.
So, and also, if it's going to go out on the agenda on Friday, they're going to need it ahead of time. There might be some prep work that needs to be done, even with whatever synopsis you introduce as part of the new business item.
On the practical side, that's when our director meeting is Wednesday morning at 9, and that's when we set the agenda for next Tuesday. So it was very much, I just check my emails when I sit down at that meeting and work to see if anybody, so that's kind of the nature of why Wednesday at 9 and why.
And then you can have the Tuesday night meeting behind you.
Yep.
There are issues that have to fold into that.
Right.
Yeah, and that's just if you're trying to get it on the next week agenda. I mean, when I brought the pet ordinance stuff up, I went to staff and it didn't come on for a while, but it was, I went to staff, I said, this is what I want to do, what would be some of the best language to use, because I hadn't done that before. And they helped me out, they gave me some ideas and told me when the best time, an optimal time to introduce it would be, and there was room for discussion. And so they built that all into the schedule too. And they had some answers to stuff that they already knew that we would ask. So they were loaded up and they were ready with some answers for things that they were anticipating they were going to ask. So it just makes the whole process go smoother if there's some, staff gets the new business heads up earlier rather than later. I mean, you can always bring it to them on Tuesday, or, on a Tuesday night or a Thursday, but that doesn't mean it's going to be on the next agenda, so.
All of these elements are designed to try and have efficient work, right? And what would be inefficient would be a new business item just sprung on everybody, because everybody sort of look at each other and say, I don't know what to do with this. And whoever was advancing that issue would be sort of the only person up to speed on it. So it's just an attempt at trying to find a way to make sure those meetings that we actually have when we're going to get into it are productive. Okay? All right. Last one on the list, designing capital projects. This is a good example of kind of I think I describe it as an 80-20 rule. It's really more like 96-4. We have a process that we've all talked about. We do a budget. We're going to do one this fall. We have to get on it. And in there will be a lot of expenditures, many capital projects of all kinds. And what is really going on is our team does the real work. Sorry, Dave. Is trying to figure out what do we think needs to be done, what do we have an estimate for a cost and that stuff. It's really early, right? It's this fall, and it might be something that's not going to happen until late next summer. And so that we see that, but we see it as part of this budget, which we're looking at. What are we really doing? We're looking at sort of the overall budget and trying to get a sense of scope, and are we doing the right priorities built into that budget? But we're not going to see it again until it comes back to where it says, okay, we've got a contract we'd like to let. Would you guys approve it? So in that interim time, a lot of people are doing work. These neighborhood meetings are happening, the staff is doing design work, and so all of a sudden there's something that's put before us, and we might have a situation. I think the one we've talked about, I think we all talked about it in the one-on-one meetings, was Clyde Estates. So there's a series of work being done, and there were a lot of opinions on the council, there were a lot of opinions from the residents that were tough to square. It was just tough to square them up and get to a spot where we felt like we could let a contract. So in that case, we got to the point where, okay, it was on an agenda to theoretically be a contract, and it went back and forth 2 or 3 times, included additional neighborhood meetings, to get to the point where we were feeling good about it. That happens almost never, right? It's happened 3 times in 4 years, something like that. But understanding how that happens and why it happens, and then feeling free to ask for a pause, stop the process, say I don't like it. That's cool. I don't want anybody to feel like saying, I really don't like this, that's going to be the offense taken by the council, balance the council, or by staff in doing so. It's going to happen really infrequently. And when it does, it's fine. It's okay. What we're doing is we're trying to have a process that allows us to get a lot of work done. If we had a situation where all 7 of us were trying to, I'm going to be ridiculous, right, but trying to pick the paint color, it'd be a circus, right? So we're trying to avoid that. And so we've built a system that avoids that. And the fact is, most of the time it gets done right because we've got really good people doing really good work. That said, don't hesitate for a moment if you don't like it. Bring it up and say so. We'll get into it. It's not going to be a problem for us. Things might get put on delay a little bit, but it's okay. It won't happen very often. Anybody got any thoughts on that? Okay. I don't have anything else. Dave, do you want to add anything?
Oh, I do. There is something that, because with those capital projects, when you get the budget book, you'll see when they're slated to go in. So they'll give you, this project is slated for 2 years from now or 3 years from now. So at least you kind of got a heads up of what might be coming. Not everything that shows up in that budget book is something that's happening this budget cycle, but stuff does show up in that budget book. It's like, hey, we know that this is a project, we know it's in there, we have it slated and scheduled for 2 years out or 3 years out. So there, you'll find that in the budget binder, because literally it's a big fat binder that we got that's full of numbers. And that's
it's full of numbers, and that's good because we do have that heads up. But when it's not full of those details, there's no renderings, there's no site plans, there's just stuff that's not there at that point, which it wouldn't be, it shouldn't be. It's not even an approved budget at that point. But Marge is right. If there's stuff that, if you're interested in something or something has caught your eye, or there's a subject, I decide I don't like parkway trees, whatever the subject is. By looking through that list that Marge is talking about, you'll see those jobs that are likely to have the stuff that's of interest to you. Take a look at them. Ask for stuff along the way. But don't be, when it gets to that point where we're out going for a contract, don't be reluctant to stop the bus. It's okay to pull the cord and stop the bus.
And it's not fun, but sometimes you have to.
Yeah, that's right. It's not the most fun thing, but it is necessary. And it's necessary for us to get it right, to do our job. Take Clyde Estates. It's probably not exactly right for anybody, but there were some evolutions to that design that made a lot more people happier than they would otherwise have been. It's okay. It cost us some time, probably cost a little money, it's okay. Anything anybody else wants to touch on? So are we going to all nod our heads and say we're good, we're just kind of hanging tight, rolling with this system for a while? Okay. I'm excited if I can get into some work other than this. a lot to do. Do you have anything you want to add, Dave?
Now that we are closing down the governance official discussion, it allows us to move forward with long-range planning, where we will really get into all these projects that we've been talking about in the abstract. So look for a draft long-range plan report, complete draft, published on Friday, August 2nd. So our next meeting, we will be officially in long-range planning.
We will be back here August 2nd. Back in
Yes.
here, okay.
Last thing I got before we get a motion to adjourn is, I'm going to finish back where I started. I'm brand new to this. Got 3 people that are brand new to this. So everybody help each other. Hang on one second. Don't think twice about asking a question. There's no dumb one. And don't think twice about offering suggestions too, because nobody can read each other's minds. So ask a question if you got one, and if you see something you'd like to, hey, I wish we did this a little different, bring it up and ask it. Okay? Rich?
Are you going to ask for any public comment?
Thank you. I should. Thanks, Rich. So we do have a little bit of public here. Hey, guys. I don't know if this was the most exciting thing ever, but do you have any comments you'd like to throw in the hopper?
Yes, I have a request and a question.
Okay.
The request is, with all due respect, Mr. Mayor, if, I don't know whatever the reason is, but I would point out that your voice does not carry.
Oh, yes.
And of all the members of the council, both previously and from what I have observed here this evening, it's true again, yours is the least audible. So if you could decide how you want to handle that, people like me and the public would not have to strain to hear you in whatever it is you're saying. I gather they're hearing you, but the way in which you're conversing with them makes it feel like it's an intimate group conversation rather than you addressing a meeting at which there is public, and I assume that applies also then in meetings in the big chamber as well.
It does.
I don't know if you want to use a mic, I don't know if you can project louder, but I would just observe that it is still the case. Although there is some benefit because now you're facing this way as opposed to facing that way when you were sitting in that chair.
Keep reminding me, and I will promise I will try and do better. It's a flaw, and I'll work on it.
The question is, the prior administration attempted to revive, albeit feebly, some energy in the Environmental Concerns Commission. I have attempted to follow that effort and have made comments in previous sessions about my disappointment at how basically inadequate that body was. And I gather part of the problem that existed previously is that they thought they shouldn't do anything, that they were not responsible for doing anything unless this body directed them to do something. And I gather one of the charges that the previous mayor gave to this set of people was to re-examine its way of operating. Regrettably, while they had some energy in the beginning, they have now not met for the last 3 times because they have failed to have a quorum. And so I bring that up as an example, both for that body and for all I know for other commissions that this village has, to ask in situations like that, where does responsibility lie for bringing some energy to a group's efforts? I'm troubled because with all the stuff that we see in the media about what's going on in the environment, and as I've tried to point out previously, I was surprised pleasantly that this village actually claimed to have a primary goal of environmental sustainability, but for at least the last 4 or 5 years and probably longer, little to nothing has been done to actually address that. And I guess what I'm leading to as a short question is, should I hold my breath and imagine that this council might actually take up that task, or should I continue to believe somewhat cynically or skeptically that momentum will continue, and it will look nice to say that we have that as a goal, but the reality is, as I observed previously, this village is concerned about the environment, just not all that much.
So a couple of things there. First of all, I would recommend not hold your breath. That would be not a good idea, because it's boards and commissions' question of how do we interact with them, how does council interact, and what are expectations is not going to be solved probably very quickly. So from that standpoint, your observations of that board and your question about whose responsibility for putting in the energy and setting the expectations for that is probably something that's going to wane a little bit. It's going to be not our top priority. That is not, though, however, equatable. Whether we have an active Environmental Concerns Commission is not a fair judgment of the village's stewardship on the environment. We have a long list, which we'd be happy to put together for you, of work that's done. What has been done with that board and many other boards, the recommending boards, is when we have an issue, I don't know, pick an issue, green fleets. We package information and we send it to those groups, and we ask them to evaluate, review that stuff, do some of their own due diligence, and come back with a recommendation for us. The fact that they haven't particularly gotten any simply means that there's work being done that we don't feel like needs additional input. So there is a ton of environmental work being done every day on a host of fronts, from energy to stormwater to traffic to pollution, air pollution it's a long, long list of things. We've got a really good record and a lot of solid work in that, which we can provide to you. Equating whether that board's active in meeting is not the same as deciding whether the village is a good steward of the environment.
Well, with all due respect, I would completely disagree with what you're saying, because regardless of whatever you imagine is going on, I don't see anything nearly focused to the same degree that, say, the Economic Development Group gets. The Economic Development Group report, for example, said boo about environmental sustainability. I pointed out in meetings over the years that this council has no identifiable metrics by which to actually demonstrate, in the same way that there's all this attention given to the marvelous AAA bond rating, that anything is actually being accomplished in the way of environmental sustainability. I mean, it's a flexible definition, and I don't know if you're telling me that we've changed the definition in such a way that the people on this council imagine we're meeting it, when in fact, if you have something in the way of a rigorous definition, we'd be far removed from actually achieving that. So my disagreement is to say that, yes, you can imagine that there are all these things going on, but to actually be able to claim that you're achieving your goal of environmental sustainability, you have no way of persuading anybody that that's the case.
So I would be happy to dig in deeper. What I'm not prepared tonight to do was persuade you. It's probably not possible in 5 minutes off my cuff to persuade you. Metrics are something that we have some, and we also have, frankly, an element of our process whereby everything that comes to us as a new business item, for whether it's construction or it's code policy or anything, one of the considerations that's given by our staff is what the effect of the change, potential change, whether it's building something new or changing a code element, what the effect of that is on environmental sustainability. It may not meet your definition of metrics, but I'd be happy to follow up with you and dig deeper and give you some sense of what has been done and what is going on. I'm not prepared to do it tonight.
Mr. Mayor, can I just
Yeah,
chime?
sure.
This is not going to satisfy your question, so I'm going to speak very generally, but I do think this has been an issue on other boards and commissions that we've had, not just the environmental board, and so I think moving forward as a council, we're going to revisit how these boards function. I think a lot of times, we try and pick the best people that want to be involved, but I think a lot of times people get busy and they kind of fall off, and then we don't ever circle back with those people and say, hey, is this something that you still want to be involved in?
Right.
And have them respond, you know what, I've just gotten too busy, I think I need to be off, and then get another person. So I think we need to look at that more as a group as well, because that is not the only board that has an issue with that. So I think that's something that we need to come up with a better system for in the future.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Nicole. I think that attendance for on many of the boards and commissions has been an issue, where it's not always easy you pick the best people you think are going to do the job, and then you wind up not being able to meet a quorum and have enough people to even have a meeting. And it gets very frustrating, it does. And then when you're looking, what is the job of that board of commission, that some of them have very set jobs. The plan commission has a very set job, the zoning board of appeals has a very set job, but some of the other boards and commissions are, the charge is more flexible, and stuff does get brought to them, but maybe not as often as we should be. And that's something we need to work on for us too.
So what should I expect to see, both with respect to the process that you just described, in terms of how this body functions better, so that you don't have boards and commissions that flounder for as long as the Environmental Concerns Commission did? And then what should I expect specifically to observe with respect to the Environmental Concerns Commission? Is there anything that can be said on either of those?
No, not tonight, there's not. You can be skeptical, which is fair, because if you're going to look back at past performance, you can say, well, the board has met, they can't be doing anything. We are in August going to be reappointing and filling some vacancies, so there will be some new members on the Environmental Concerns Commission. Our hope, to Marge's point, would certainly be that at that point we have a team of people on that board and commission who are available to serve and actually fill the meetings and establish a quorum. It still is to the point, they will deal with stuff right now in our current structure that we send them. And so that may not meet your expectations of what you'd like them to be doing. It's possible that's simply not going to be met. But that's what their charge is right now. And they don't always get stuff. There are times when ADRB doesn't meet because there's no agenda items for them. Right now, that's how we work with those boards and commissions.
And to that
Why
point,
is that?
Well, to that point, well,
There's no cases.
yeah.
Why, I guess what I'm asking is, why do you want the commissions not to have initiative, not to take initiative? That seems silly.
Well, with ADRB, they have to have a voluntary submission request for historic preservation, and it's up to the homeowners. We're not forcing the homeowners to landmark their homes. So this month, there was not a petition put forth to the village in enough time, and I think it's 3 weeks in advance, could be more than that now. So there's no reason to have an ADRB meeting. They would simply, if they did, they'd convene and they'd have no cause.
My impression, based on the conversation that took place, I think it was the February meeting with Mayor Tully, and the exchange that the members of the body had at that juncture, their understanding, which I thought I was hearing you say is still the way things work, is that unless they're told to do something, they don't do anything.
Right.
And that strikes me as very perplexing, especially when you're talking about the Environmental Concerns Commission, because unless you're imagining that you guys are supposed to be the repository, then that's saying that while they're members of the community and they have contacts within the community, that if they hear anything that they think is deserving of attention, I'm not clear as to what you say, how that's supposed to rise to the level of the council's attention, so that the council then tells the commission to do something.
So the reason for that primarily is because of sheer workload. There are, 100 or so, 110 people that serve on boards and commissions in the village of Downers Grove, not just environmental concerns. If every one of those people could just decide, I've got an idea, in order for that to be anything meaningful to the village, if that's policy change, ordinance change, regulation change, it has to go through a process of evaluation, right? It can't just be one person who happens to be into the subject of the day. That could rise to a level of work we simply could not accomplish. So one of the things we do right now, whether it's silly or not, one of the things we do, and it's been going on for 15 or 20 years, the way we've dealt with those boards and commissions, the way we've interacted with them, is we've sent what we want them to be as a resource with which we can send them and ask for their input on. Now, there's a whole different way of doing it. We could do what I think I'm hearing you suggest, which is we want them to get together as experts in the field of environmental concerns and come up with things we should be doing. That's not what we do right now. It's one of the subjects that we're kind of deciding tonight we're going to punt on a little bit. So to your question about what should I expect, not much change, at least for a little while. But that's part of the basis of it. If you have 120 or 115 people throughout the community that are all dreaming up ideas, how would you process those as a village government? It can be overwhelming.
Well, I thought they also were looking at some of the language in the statutes as they exist right now, and some of that language included, and I don't have it in front of me, I didn't bring that with me, but I thought it included possible actions that they could take that were not directly connected to the council in that sense. Educational kinds of things, for example, which I don't know if it's thought on the council's part that for a group like the Environmental Concerns Commission to do educational or outreach kinds of activities, it has to come from the council. But at least the discussion that was taking place at some of those initial meetings was giving the impression that they have been operating in that fashion, and at least at that juncture there was some question as to whether they were being restrained by either lacking council directive or lacking budget or other things of that sort. But it was there. I thought my recollection was that there were explicit statutes which were of a nature that didn't necessarily involve interaction between the council and the commission, but that the commission could be doing things within the community that would address the community's involvement in environmental sustainability.
Go ahead, Marcia.
We just talked about how we shouldn't be saying much of anything without kind of the stamp of approval because we could get ourselves in trouble. The same thing is with the Environmental Concerns Commission. If we're going out there and we don't know what they're saying, we can get in the same kind of trouble because that's like asking us to put the village, on behalf of the village, these people get to go out there and say whatever they want. We don't even get to do that. So it's, everything has to be a cohesive package. So I think maybe, I think I know what you're getting at, but that's not always the result. It's not always as simple as you would like it to be. Because if it comes out under the guise of, a village managed, where this is what the official Environmental Concerns Commission is saying, and they're all out there saying whatever they've decided they're going to say, and we don't know about that in advance, and there was no budget for that or whatever, but it's coming from us, and we can wind up being, hey, you guys said that, that's what we should be doing. And if it's supposed to be a cohesive message where one village, and if we're speaking, it needs to be coming through the same channels. So one hand can't be doing something that the other hand doesn't know about.
Well, I think there's another point as we go into long-range planning and the high-priority action items. That's when we have public meetings to discuss moving forward for the next 2 years. Here are the things the village wants to work on, and then each one of us will get to weigh in on that. People sitting in these chairs will get to weigh in on that. Say, okay, out of the whatever things, 19 things we decide that we want to do, what are the highest priorities that we have to work on? And then that's kind of where that becomes, in effect, the operating plan, the long-range operating plan of the village. And then we decide, well, how are we going to accomplish that? Can we accomplish it with a directive to staff, or do we want to toss it off to one of the commissions? Because the whole idea behind a board or commission or an ad hoc committee or ad hoc subcommittee is they can drill down. They can meet on 6 Wednesday nights once a month, and we can collect a bunch of information and come up with something specific. But that's more the process, David, as to how those items would get introduced.
I think Greg wants to say.
And Rich really started to touch on it there. I mean, we shouldn't think of boards and commissions as subcommittees of this body. They're really not. We want their input, and we appreciate their input because many of them are experts in their field. But at the same time, to Marge's point, we can't have them, off driving initiatives. We simply don't have the budget for that. And when we go into long-range planning and go into budget discussions, we can decide if there are initiatives that it might make sense to get their input on. But handing a board or commission a checkbook on behalf of the village, I think is something that would catch everybody at this table by surprise.
And I think it's important to know, too, that there used to be kind of a rolling appointment process, which those appointments for boards and commissions would come up very irregularly, and that has been changed over the years to where the appointments all come due, whoever's up for reappointment or vacant positions, it all comes due end of August, beginning of September, I believe, is the time frame. So it's about time that we're looking at people now to fill boards and commission positions. And then if there's a vacancy, an odd vacancy here or there, sometimes we fill it if we know, if somebody has resigned. But by and large, this is the time, right about now, when those boards and commissions are going to be opening up. And if you want to get on one.
What has been the practice in the past in terms of dealing with inactive groups or individuals who are appointed but then consistently don't participate? Is that tracked in any way, and is there procedure in place?
Well, that's kind of what I was trying to get at earlier, is currently, I really don't believe, unless I'm incorrect, that there truly is one, unfortunately. And so, again, that's why this is not the only board that has an issue with establishing a quorum. And so, again, that's something that we may need to visit and come up with a more structured plan on.
This is a subject that we chose tonight, and we chose through several conversations leading up tonight to not really get into. And what that means is that nobody here is fully prepared for it. And so we're all sort of winging it. But I think the main takeaway that you should take is that if you want information on what the village has done in a proactive manner relative to the environment, environmental stewardship, we'd be happy to provide you with some. As it relates to that committee, you don't have to like it, but we'd be happy to provide it to you. As it relates to that committee, they largely operate right now as a function of us assigning them work. So sometimes there isn't any. That's it. That's about all I can give you tonight.
More than I could hope for, I suppose.
Or maybe less.
Go ahead.
So I'll just keep it to this because it's getting late. Cautiously optimistic. Yeah, I mean, it's good that you have these meetings, but you had them in the past and you had them in the past, and hopefully everybody nodded their head that, yeah, this is what we're going to do and this is how we plan to interact with each other. But in councils past, that interaction hasn't always, everybody shakes their heads and says, yeah, we're going to do this, but it always hasn't demonstrated itself out there on the dais or in the community and stuff like that. So I just encourage you guys to, think about what everybody said they're going to do today and follow through with that, because I think it will be a lot better out there and it'll be a lot better for our residents.
Thanks for coming. Thank you for coming. All right. Anybody else has anything? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all. Thank you, guys.